A huge fishman was lying on the ground, leaning against a massive stone, and his chest was agitated by a storm of indignation and pain. The battle he had entered had left merciless traces in his body and soul. With every breath, every cough, he felt his strength waning, but his determination did not weaken. Every blow, every scar on his skin reminded him that he would not allow himself to be defeated. Ka, the fishman cleared his throat, forcefully wiping the blood from his chin. He had already suffered enough damage, but he wasn't going to give up in front of his enemy. Through the pain and difficult breathing, he saw his goal and moved towards it, as if despite physical suffering. A man from a mountain tribe was rushing straight at him. His eyes were burning with rage, and the words "are done with it, fish scum" sounded like a challenge. However, the fishman knew that he was facing a dangerous opponent, and he was not going to give in. At that moment, adrenaline forced him to focus on the fight. The fist of the man from the mountain tribe flashed over the head of the fishman, but thanks to his reaction, he dodged. The fist slammed into the massive stone with force, causing a crack and the formation of a small hole. This incident gave the fishman a new energy and faith in his own strength. Here's a chance. Opened. It flashed through his mind. The fishman, using his weight and strength, kicked the attacker in the side. The opponent's hand got stuck in a rock, and a member of the mountain tribe lost his balance, which gave the fishman another opportunity. Grabbing the attacker by the belt, Haishi rushed to the nearest water. "Let's go for a swim," he shouted furiously, trying to get to the water, where his strength would be more equal. But the joy was short-lived, because the mountain man was not going to give up. He was aware that he was inferior in strength in the water, but his audacity knew no bounds. "Your mother." The Highlander swore in despair, bracing his feet on the ground and trying to fight back. The earth trembled from the intense struggle between them, and it seemed that it was about to open up from their mighty efforts. And at that moment, like a tornado from the sky, a shadow slipped behind the mountain man. A girl from the sea tribe, with a knife in her hand, was approaching the wrestlers. Her eyes burned with painful determination and rage. Nothing could stop her now. Here he is, the enemy, and it remains only to finish him off. Her arrival warmed the heart of the fishman, giving him the strength to continue fighting, despite fatigue and pain. The battle has just received a new round, and its outcome has become even more incomprehensible. And so, in the blink of an eye, it seemed that events unfolded so quickly that the brain barely had time to capture every moment of this epic battle. The people from the mountain tribe who were watching this fight were just on the verge of their feelings. They not only watched, but also lived every movement, every detail of this drama. The girl, brave and determined, rushed to the aid of her friend, and her aggressive decision did not go unnoticed. One of the mighty mountaineers, who seemed to have come straight out of fairy tale legends, was like a giant bear. His muscular figure rose above the others, and he grabbed his less massive companion like a toy bear and threw him towards the girl. This moment was so spectacular, as if it was an action from a circus performance. The smaller Highlander was spinning in the air like an acrobat on a high trapeze, performing pirouettes and spins before approaching the target. Suddenly he turned around and put out his hands, as if he was waiting to catch the girl. He hissed, enjoying the moment, "Get ready." The girl was absolutely not ready for such a blow. The strength of the Highlanders was known far and wide, and this guy used the inertia of his comrade's throw to strengthen the blow. The collision was powerful, and she flew like a projectile towards the water. She landed in the water, narrowly avoiding a painful impact on the ground. Soon she managed to open her eyes and see that the smaller Highlander was swimming towards her with a smile on his face. Meanwhile, as an observer, I felt almost helpless in this maelstrom of events. My eyes were fixed on the leader of the mountain tribe, who stared at me unwaveringly, as if saying, "You're not going anywhere." His companions continued to communicate with each other, as if I were an insignificant spectacle. I knew I couldn't just stand by and watch. However, it was impossible to help them, since the leader of the Highlanders did not let me go, and his people were determined to prepare for any of my actions. It turned out that the two Highlanders, obviously brothers, began to change their minds about the battle. "Brother, didn't the king of the mountain tribe promise us entertainment?" one of them asked with a grin. "Why did Muki and Shuhu start first? Maybe we can fight this guy too?" He pointed at me. His brother replied, "Isn't this game meant for the king?" However, the first brother continued to insist. "Don't worry about it. Who had time, he ate." And so, two brothers, with eternal smiles on their faces, took their torches and knives in their hands and rushed in my direction. My mission was clear, I had to act. However, it was impossible to move as there were adamant mountaineers in front of me, ready to stop me at any cost. I had to make a decision, and I chose the path of resistance. My colleagues were ready to defend themselves and shouted, "Are you getting into a fight with our king? Then you'll have to go through us. Die." The brothers answered shortly. One of them got hit in the side, being in a losing position, and the other lost his torch with one well-aimed movement of my warrior. The mountain fighters seemed surprised by this reaction. At first they were shocked, but soon they had a grin on their faces. These people were used to dangers and were not afraid of difficult situations. There was a challenge in front of them, which they accepted with joy. After a brief pause, during which the mountaineers were satisfied with the moment, one of the brothers said, "Brother, be careful. If you lose, you will disgrace yourself." In response to this, the other brother just grinned and said, "Let's have some fun." He walked towards me, preparing for a fight. "Okay, then I'm having fun with this guy," the first brother said, expressing his willingness to go to the fight. "I want to bathe in his blood." This change of events filled the air with tension. I was seized with indignation at the brutality that these mountaineers demonstrated, as if killing was something entertaining for them. They clearly didn't know the word pity. While the guy wielding the wooden weapon continued to approach, his muscles tensed, speaking of his physical strength. With accuracy and strength that were more suited to the hero of the fairy tale, he easily moved the trunk of the tree that we had set up as a trap. Now it has become his weapon, and he has made it look easy, as if the barrel weighed a fluffy stick. Great, he whispered, looking at the barrel with satisfaction. He threw it on his shoulder and walked towards the leader of the mountain tribe, as if showing off his prey. But the leader of the Highlanders was not so simple. He warned, "You can do whatever you want, but stay away from me." "All right," the giant replied happily, and stepping aside, headed to the place where the fight between Haishi, the Fishman, and a member of the mountain tribe took place. This was a bad sign, because Haishi was already on the exhausting edge. He did not have enough strength to fight two mountaineers at the same time, and a giant with a wooden weapon was approaching them to meet with a willingness to destroy everything in his path. I need to help him, I decided. My thoughts were filled with determination and persistence. We had to stand up. I had to think quickly about the strategy. At this time, my warriors were starting from their positions and preparing to meet with the mountain brothers. The chief of the mountain tribe continued to watch me with a proud sneer. When I moved in Haishi's direction to help him, my instincts told me, "Dodge." It was more than intuition, it was a reaction to danger. I instantly made an evasion, and at that very moment the sword of the leader of the Highlanders cut through the air where my head had just been. His attack was so fast and strong that it was like a lightning strike. "Are you ignoring me?" the chief roared, having lost his own control over himself. "You're looking down on me. It pisses me off." His scream pierced the air, and he wielded his sword as if he was an angry god of war. His eyes were filled with rage, and he was ready to end this battle with a fatal blow. However, my quick evasion gave me another chance. I instantly focused and prepared for a retaliatory attack. My warriors were also ready to join the battle and support me. The battle became even more heated, and everyone moved with their own intentions. At this time, Haishi continued to fight with the Highlander, despite his exhaustion and fatigue. A giant with a wooden weapon came closer and closer to the wrestlers. This moment was critical, and I felt I had to act immediately. Swinging his sword, he carried out attack after attack, as if dancing amidst the whirlwind of battle. Lightning strikes fell on opponents, and his incredible accuracy made him deadly. Despite all the brutality and speed of the fight, he managed to pronounce the words as if they were his second language. "Don't get distracted," he shouted, and his voice pierced the air, breaking into the winds of war. "Show me your real skills." There was a fire of determination in his eyes to prove his superiority. Meanwhile, I continued to dodge all his attacks, trying in vain to defend myself and keep the enemy's attention on me. Although I continued to skillfully dodge, but I won't be able to help Haishi this way. There was no choice. With the onset of despair, I cried out, "Who can someone help Haishi?" The big man, who was heading towards the fighting, was pulling a tree trunk behind him, as if it were a piece of fluff. His muscular body perfectly coped with this task, as if even nature was on his side. However, suddenly he slowed down. "What?" He spoke absurdly and slowly, his eyebrows curled in perplexity. "Has the tree become heavier?" And then he turned around and saw Dada holding the barrel on the other side. "Stand still," she cried with pride and precious determination. "If it's about brute force, then I'm not inferior to anyone in it. Her words were full of pride and inner fire. She was ready to join forces and change the course of this battle to give Haishi a chance to win. The giant, a monster of enormous size, his body as if carved out of a rock, looked at Dada with a grin that looked more like a zealot than a gambler. He stuck out his giant chest frame, as if preparing for a great game and not a battle for death and life. "Do you want to play with me?" he asked with haughtiness and added. "You're pretty." His gaze was so vile that it was like shards of ice pierced Dada's heart. Then, like a sudden hail from the sky, arrows flew in his direction. They were precise and fast, creating many sparkling metal dots in the air. The giant had to postpone the attack on Dada and go on the defensive. He slowly raised his giant palm, trying to shield his face from the approaching deadly arrows. They dug into his fleshy arm, leaving wounds from which dark blood gushed out. "Perfectly," the giant shouted, blood trickling down his arm and splashing on the ground. "Someone else wants to play with me." After that, he shouted in the direction of his king, with whom I had been fighting all this time. The king of the Highlanders only grinned and said, "Sure. Have as much fun as you want. Otherwise, when we get back to the mountain, you'll be alone again." Meanwhile, the archer and Xiong, who were sitting in the trees, were considering further actions. Xiong was determined to help his comrades in battle. He repeated, "The king and the others are fighting a bloody battle, you need to help them." The archer was thinking out loud. "The trap we set. She used to help us bring down a whole bear. And this monster stopped her with just one movement and didn't even suffer from the blow. Even if we go down, there's nothing we can do." After thinking about this situation for a couple of seconds, she said, "I'll distract their attention, and you go back to the camp and notify the queen of what is happening. Ask her to send us reinforcements." Xiong nodded his head without hesitation. "Yes, I understand." And then he added, "Be careful." Meanwhile, not far from the river, the deadly struggle of the Fishman Haishi and the warrior of the mountains continued. Haishi, like a man-fish, pressed with all his weight, trying to pull a person into the water. Water splashes flew in all directions, like a fountain of bright watercolor paint. He was in his element, but his opponent resisted like a rock in coastal waters. Every blow that this mountain warrior dealt was accurate and strong, leaving bruises and cuts on Haishi's body. "The bastard!" the Highlander shouted, his voice sounding like the roar of a tiger. "Let me go already." After that, a new series of blows followed, including an elbow strike. Ka. Haishi was holding on hard. With each new blow, he coughed up blood. It was bad. He needed to throw his opponent into the river where he could use his natural abilities. "We need to push him into the river." Such thoughts were floating in his head. "A little more. Come on." Gathering all the strength in his legs, he attacked the enemy with a new level of determination and tore him off the ground, rushing to the river. "Let's go for a swim," he shouted furiously, his voice echoing through the surrounding fields as if calling for battle. "On my battlefield," he added with unwavering determination. His face was distorted with burning passion and his eyes sparkled with a thirst for victory. He forcefully pulled his opponent towards the river, whose waters were flowing noisily, creating a backdrop for this epic fight. But suddenly, from the depths of the river, as if from fairy tale legends, Alan emerged, the same mysterious Fishman girl that everyone knew in the area. She exclaimed, her voice sounding alarmed. "Haishi. Don't come here. It's not safe here." There was fear on her face, and it wasn't empty anxious chatter. Suddenly, the hands of the guy she tried to save emerged from the water. He grabbed the girl and dragged her under the water, creating a new round of tension in this grim fight. Haishi stood in confusion, watching what was happening. Why can't she handle him in the water? This is a riddle that he had to solve. Meanwhile, the Highlander kept hitting him on the back as if he wasn't going to stop. "Stinky fish, let me go," he shouted, tirelessly striking more and more blows. One of them turned out to be particularly strong and fell on Haishi's wound. "Ka." Haishi blurted out. The blow was so strong that it knocked him to the ground. He was coughing up blood, as if his own body had betrayed him at the most decisive moment of the battle. But suddenly his eyes turned completely black, as if absorbed by a dark force. And he cried out, "Get up!" as if breathing in new life. Rising from the ground, Haishi picked up the mountaineer, like an ancient Greek Hercules, and stuck him into the ground, throwing him over himself. An ordinary person would have been instantly defeated, but Haishi continued to fight, squeezing out the last of his strength. Breathing heavily, he lay next to his unconscious opponent. After inspecting the battlefield, Haishi thought, "Brothers, I leave the rest to you." His words were full of faith in his comrades who continued to fight for him and his goal. while a fierce battle between two twin brothers and Haishi warriors was developing nearby. The battle was fierce, but neither side was in a hurry to approach each other, carefully studying their opponents. And one of the Haishi warriors exclaimed to his comrade, "Langguchui. Use that move." The partner replied, "Understood." They both rushed at the enemy, attacking from both sides at once, striving to use a cunning technique that they knew. The mountain brothers also communicated with each other, and one of them said, "Xiaohu, these two fools are coming at us themselves. Let's deal first with the one with the hammer." They smiled as if victory was already in their pocket and decided to start with the one who owned the hammer. "You're finished." The mountain brothers exclaimed, rushing together at Langguchui, who was holding a hammer in his hands, preparing for a desperate battle. The moment was shrouded in tension, as if time had slowed down. Langguchui seemed lost in this situation, and his hands slowly lowered as he clutched his face, experiencing unbearable pain. "Ah!" He let out a loud cry, as if he was trying to tear this painful moment out of himself. His eyes shimmered with pain and tears, and he felt every drop of tears touching his own wound. Such pain was unbearable. Seeing this, his partner shouted at the top of his voice filled with anger and despair. "Scoundrels!" The bitterness of the struggle in his soul only intensified, and he gripped his axe tightly, preparing to repay his enemies for this betrayal. His soul was filled with anger for his comrade. You could see how the muscles of his body tensed, and he gripped his axe with such force that his fingers turned white. He was ready for battle, despite the danger that lay in wait for them. Clutching his axe, he charged without hesitation, as if his actions were filled with fierce determination. You could see the fire of determination and rage in his eyes, and he shouted, "Attack me." His voice sounded resolute and defiant, as if he was summoning fate. Then, with a wide swing, he threw his axe towards the opponent. The axe shot up in the air like a fiery meteor and landed accurately on the shoulder of one of the brothers of the mountain tribe. There was a terrible scream of pain, and blood gushed out of the wound, painting the surrounding world in gloomy tones. "Right on target," the warrior said with confidence, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. But his fighting spirit did not allow him to stop. "Go away, Langguchui, leave the rest to me." He was left with only one shield, preparing to defend himself. His eyes were focused on the enemies, and he was preparing for a new wave of attacks. The brothers of the mountain tribe, seeing that their comrade was wounded, were seriously angry. Their anger was like a raging volcano, and they targeted the attack again. "You'd take care of yourself first before saving others," one of the mountaineers shouted, and his voice pierced the air like a blade. In response, the warrior with the shield began to read the movements of his opponent and actively defend himself, as if the shield had become his reliable protection in this deadly dance. "3 steps." He shouted loudly, slowly approaching the enemy. Suddenly, he missed one blow because of his small shield, and a wound like a burning flame appeared on his side. But that didn't stop him from seeking victory. The warrior wheezed in pain, but continued to stand on his feet. Grabbing his opponent's blade, he said loudly, "2 steps." His breathing was heavy, and blood was trickling down his sides, but his eyes sparkled with determination. "What are you counting there?" the Highlander asked aggressively, trying to pull out his blade. But the warrior's hands held him firmly. With a strong movement, he pulled the opponent towards him and grabbed his hands, and then shouted again. 1 step. Looking towards his partner, he raised his voice and shouted, "Langguchui. Let's." And at the moment when it seemed that Langguchui had already been knocked out of the game, he suddenly rose into the air, like an experienced circus performer who had been training for many years. Pushing off from his friend's shield, he flew into the air and, swinging his huge hammer, aimed a blow at the enemy with all his might, shouting loudly, "Right above you. You're finished." The brother realized that in this situation he had little chance to survive, and fear was reflected on his face. It seemed that there was no way out, but suddenly the wounded brother of the mountaineer pushed him out from under the blow, shouting, "Xiaohu. Get down." A powerful kick severed the bond between the warriors, but the hammer blow was already inevitable. The wounded man, with an axe in his shoulder, received a powerful hammer blow. "Kaya!" There was a loud sound of bones cracking. "Brother!" the survivor shouted, and at that moment the situation changed dramatically. At that time, the archer was struggling with despair, trying to find a way out of this deadly trap. She fired arrows at a huge monster that disguised itself as a human. He was slow and incredibly strong, and the arrows definitely reached him, but he didn't seem to feel any pain. The arrows easily penetrated his flesh, but he continued to move like a death machine. At this time, Bellica threw a huge log, accurately aiming at Dada. The latter was forced to defend himself with the handle of his axe, and a huge log hung over him, as if dreaming of crushing him. Dada felt her strength running out, and it was clear to her that such a battle could not last long. What's it? The sharp-eyed archer carefully examined the surroundings and suddenly noticed something flashing in the tall grass. It was a rope. Exactly so. She flashed in the rays of the sun, like a thread of life in this battle on the verge of life and death. While Dada was holding on hard, her physical and emotional strain was palpable. Her body was trembling and every muscle was on edge, but an unwavering determination flickered on her face. Panting, she clutched the handle of the axe, as if it was the only thing that kept her on her feet. There was a fire of will burning inside her that could not be extinguished. And suddenly she noticed how the arrows released by Ayan pierced the ground very close. But how is this possible? Dada couldn't explain to herself how her shots could miss at such a distance. But she didn't have time to think. What? Did she miss? But that's impossible. Do the skills fail? She mused aloud, her gaze fixed on the place where the arrows fell. But suddenly an understanding came to her. It was a rope. Exactly so. Haha. I got it, Ayan, you are a genius. The joy on Dada's face was impossible to convey in words. At that moment, she realized what she had to do. With her feet planted on the ground, she instantly threw up a huge log, and her movements were so precise that she deftly dodged its fall, directing her body directly towards the discovered rope. What? The giant asked with a malicious grin on his face. Hey. Won't you play with me? Dada smiled slyly. Haha. I will. Gripping the rope tightly, she rushed to the giant's back, shouting. Let's play with you. And now she is behind the giant's back, using her strength to control the rope. It was like a miracle of flexible rope, as if alive, wrapped around the legs of the enemy, creating such a maze in which he certainly got entangled. Don't hide. We haven't finished playing yet. Repeated the giant, not noticing how the rope was around his legs. Dada wound a rope around the giant, like an artist creating his work, and every movement was a road to victory. You want to play with me, don't you? I'm here. She shouted again, a voice filled the air, and at that moment the giant turned around, his huge legs got tangled in the rope, and with a crash and clumsiness he fell to the ground, creating a cloud of dust, and his gun, in fact just our log trap, flew towards the river. At the same time, near the river, the scene unfolds with breathtaking drama. Rotten fish. I underestimated you. The mountain warrior said, standing on his feet, his muscular body reminiscent of the incessant battles he was forced to fight in this cruel world. Haishi, breathing heavily, slowly got up from the sandy bank of the river, his hands clenched into fists, and he looked dried up and exhausted. Fool. So you were able to get up? He said mockingly. The man was smiling, standing in front of him, covered in wounds, bruises and abrasions, but the smile did not leave his face, as if he was enjoying the fight. Haha. You almost killed me, Fishman. Well, what can I say? You're just out of luck. He replied, his voice sounding tired, but there was determination in it. The mountain warrior was so confident of his victory that he did not even notice how the enemy was moving his eyes behind his back. Hey. Damn it. Ducking his head, he crouched to the ground. The mountain warrior did not expect such a reaction and did not even have time to turn around when a powerful blow with a log directly on the back of his head knocked him unconscious. Haishi, looking at the body of his opponent, said, It looks like I'm luckier than yours. A series of victories on the battlefield gave me hope, but my battle with the king of the mountain tribe seemed to have just begun. Wielding my metal battle axe, I repelled and parried all his attacks. The situation was a stalemate. My hands are already numb. I'm afraid I can't take the next blow. Suddenly, a torch fell between me and the king of the mountain tribe. We hurriedly turned around and saw a small man who threw it. Approaching the leader of the mountain tribe, he spoke. It's time to use this. I know you don't like it, but it's a witch's order. He handed the leader some strange reddish leaves and then added. I will hide in the water. When the case smells fried, you will be able to return home unharmed. The witches warn you, you will lose this battle, you know what will happen. The king of the tribe was quiet for a moment and then nodded. Except I wasn't going to stand there like that. Red ginseng. Is this madcap going to give up his mind to strengthen his body? It's bad. I will not allow this. Gripping my axe tightly, I decided to use my inner strength. Sparks flew from my axe, the runes inscribed on it gave me new energy. My whole body was covered with a bright yellow aura, and I was ready to fight for my life and the future of the tribe. Red ginseng? The chief asked in surprise, while maintaining an unyielding calm. He looked at the mysterious root that lay in front of him, waiting for its fate. But at that moment his thoughts were interrupted by a dwarf holding a bouquet of flowers in his hands. "I think the witch has guessed my character," the chief said, looking at the dwarf. Suddenly, a powerful energy attack lit up in the air, directed towards the dwarf. The latter barely managed to dodge, jumping away, and fell to the ground, not far from the torch and the king's feet. The trees in the place where he was standing were instantly cut down by a powerful attack. "Oh shit," the dwarf dropped, reaching for the torch. Looking at his leader, he added, "Since you are so indecisive, let me decide everything for you." He had already grabbed the torch, preparing to set fire to the red ginseng, but then the king of the mountain tribe intervened. "Stop!" the king said loudly and cut down the burning end of the torch so that it went out. Seeing this, the dwarf shouted. How? How did you manage to resist the witches?" Equally calmly, the leader replied, "I don't believe it's the witch's order. You can go back and tell her about it." The dwarf was very angry. "Then don't complain about the consequences," he said through his teeth and, running away, shouted, "One leg here, the other there." Wait a bit. We were left alone with the king of the mountain tribe. I could tell by his face that he was analyzing me. The king of the mountain tribe thought. Where did he get this destructive power? I analyzed the situation. Having dealt with the ichthyosaur, he rushed to help. I didn't have time to recover. Even the power was already running out earlier. Everything was swimming in my eyes, and my body was incredibly tense, even my hands were shaking. I won't be able to hold out for long in this state. I can hardly strike another blow. Even if I succeed from fatigue, I will immediately lose consciousness. The situation of my warriors also did not cause optimism. Their strength must have dried up a long time ago. If I lose, the leader of the mountain community will swat them all at once. But why did he put out the torch? Maybe this is some new trick? Questions swirled in my head like clouds over mountains. Meanwhile, the tribal leader was standing in front of me, his blade pointed in my direction, and he took a defensive stance. I realized that there was no time to think. It was the moment when my fate, life or death, was being decided, and I needed to act. Okay, there's no time to think, it's still unknown what's coming. Life or death. Therefore, while we have the strength, we need to end it faster. My axe and his blade crossed in a series of powerful blows. We were both exhausted, but it seemed that my power was higher. Breathing heavily, we both stared at each other, our eyes radiating aggression and determination. Not bad, my opponent said. Why didn't you show all your might before? Looking at my wounds, the king of the mountain tribe realized that such injuries could not have been inflicted by his hands. Perhaps the reason for my strength was the ritual of sacrifice? These thoughts were spinning in his head. I'm afraid you won't last long, he continued. To tell the truth, I'm on the edge myself. The divine power bestowed by witches is about to disappear. After these words, I noticed that his hands were shaking as much as mine. The leader continued to say, there's definitely no way to dodge your next attack, so I'll hit with all my might myself. A grin stretched across his face, and he added, I hope the winner will be determined in an honest way. Don't worry, King Shen, if you fall, I won't hurt your people. Breathing heavily, I smiled and replied, it's nice to hear that, but promises are unnecessary. Ready to fight. I gathered the last strength in my hands and pulled the axe in an attacking position. The leader of the warriors shouted a war cry, and we both rushed at each other. Enveloped in energy, we rushed as if a collision was inevitable. And then, for a moment, our weapons clashed. The energy enveloped us, and a second later there was a powerful explosion. The whole clearing was locked in a layer of dust and smoke. After a while, the smoke dissipated. My warriors, panting and coughing from the dust, looked for me with their eyes. Found it. One of them shouted. When the dust finally cleared, they saw me standing over the body of the mountain chief. A huge crater formed where he was lying. He was unconscious, but even unconscious, he was smiling. He was happy with the fight. I turned around to inspect the results of my warriors' battles, but I didn't have time to get enough. The power bestowed by the axe gave a return. The feeling of hundreds of small needles piercing my arm was so familiar. It was the same feeling I had when I defeated the Bull King. Damn, I whispered. A little more and I'm finished. You can't use the power of Pangu for nothing. I hurriedly took out the medicine and began to treat my wound. My arm ached as if it had been pierced by fiery arrows, but I knew that I could not allow myself to fall, covered with shame in front of my warriors. However, when I was almost ready to fall to the ground, something soft and warm stopped me. It was Ayan, my faithful companion and ally. "The leader of our tribe cannot fall in disgrace," she said with determination. With these words, she took me by the arm. With the last of my strength, I managed to say, "Be careful, they still have one more person, he is hiding in the river." Ayan nodded, promising that everything would be fine. "The allies had arrived," she added, and I saw the blurred silhouettes of our warriors on the horizon. "Make sure that Alan is safe, and then you can leave," I reminded him. "The main thing is to help Alan, remember?" With these words, I handed her a bottle of medicine. "Yes, rely on us," Ayan replied with confidence. After hearing this, I felt that I could finally calm down. My eyes were closing by themselves, and I realized that my brain was going to shut down.